Hi everyone, I'm Maud, I'm the founder of Salty Studio and I'm based in London in the UK. I run private, corporate and public experiences as well as workshops, food design projects and research and lots of other exciting things. Obviously due to COVID at the moment, things are changing a little bit, but I think this is really an exciting time for us to sort of be a bit more innovative and think outside the box. So this has actually helped me take part in the virtual Dutch Design Week. So my background is mostly in design. So I studied a BA in Sustainable Product Design at Falmouth University in Cornwall in the UK, so it's the southwest of England. And I slowly realised that I really wanted to integrate food into my design projects and even make them all about food. And so then I studied a master's in food design and innovation in Milan at the School of Politecnica de Design, which I graduated from a bit more than 2 years ago. And I've been really curious about the food design world, and I worked with various studios, including Tour de Fork in Milan, Conference Campus in Denmark, and Studio H in Cape Town as well. And I really obviously like traveling as well, so this has really been really interesting experiences to understand how these different design studios work around the world and sort of how they apply food design in the real life outside of university. And so when I returned to London after my studies, I felt like I really needed to express myself. And I decided to open my own little food design studio, so Salty Studio in London. And it's been 2 years now, and I've hosted many different events using food as a tool to tell stories and to elevate the sensory experience. So I really like to try and find stories behind different ingredients, try and communicate different messages, and to really try and create experiences that people will really remember at the end. So this can be for brands, this can be for companies. I've done things like lunch meetings, product launches and different events like this. I've also done some public supper clubs as well. So I really enjoy talking about sort of more theoretical and research side of food design and lots of different topics around food. So during the whole lockdown situation, in the past few months, I hosted a whole series of talks called Edible Words, and we spoke about lots of different topics around food, so food culture and history, food science, architecture and interior design around food, lots of different things. And I'm actually hosting a talk this week on Thursday, so it'd be lovely to have some of you there. And I really like to collaborate with different people and find the richness from other fields. And I think that's my one of my passions as a food designer, is to find different people who have different professional backgrounds and experiences, and how we can use that to really create some really interesting and innovative concepts and projects and experiences. So this year I'm really excited to be taking part in the virtual Dutch Design Week in partnership with Isola.design district. So I lived in Milan when I was doing my master's, and it's really nice to be able to get back in touch with a Milanese company. And so their exhibition for the Dutch Design Week is called Materialized, and they explain that the future of design can and should be increasingly orientated towards reducing waste and plastics. And sustainability is something I'm really interested in and passionate about, as I studied my bachelor's in sustainable product design, and it really opened my eyes on the different ways that we can really improve the sustainability side of things within design, from really the start all the way to the end, and even, for example, the emotional attachment that we can have with different products, how we can keep them for longer. And I'm slowly going even further than that and looking into zero waste ways to change in our lifestyle and in my work. So I decided to look at this topic more from a food design and sustainability point of view, and I titled my project "Can We Change?" as sort of question. And a lot of my work is questioning things and trying to understand what solutions we can bring to different issues, for example, like this. And I think by questioning different important issues, we can hopefully get to some answers and some solutions. So most of the things that we eat still come packaged. Whether you buy some vegetables at the supermarket, especially at the moment, I think most supermarkets I've been to seem to wrap everything in plastic, even cucumbers and bananas and things that already have a sort of their own packaging, natural packaging. And this is obviously for some health reasons and food safety. And juice, for example, always comes in a carton, in a sort of cardboard box. A pack of crisps or a takeaway meal, there's always some kind of plastic in there or a material that isn't yet recyclable, and it will end up in our landfill for years. And actually, even some materials that are meant to be compostable might not always be compostable in your home composter. They might only be compostable or biodegradable in a really industrial composting plants, and so that actually sort of goes against the whole idea of why some of these brands have created these products. So I think there's still a lot of effort and a lot of work to do in this sort of area. And so why do we use so much plastic and other unsustainable materials? We now know about the negative effects of plastic and these other materials on our bodies and on our environment and the planet. And how can we challenge these issues then and obstacles in order to create a more sustainable environment? I think in the hospitality industry, this is something that I'm quite curious about, and I think some restaurants and some places are really trying to work on this and to make this, find some innovative solutions to go against the sort of food safety and hygiene requirements that might be needed, which is why there's a lot of plastic that has been used at the moment. And so when I first started to think about this project, I was looking at recreating a whole tray with the plates, sort of like in the airplane. So you've got the tray, the plate, cutlery, cups, sauce packets, and all of this is all packaging, and it will all be used only once, and then it'll be thrown away. And so my idea was to try and create all of this with edible materials. Sort of the idea was to make people question the idea of using edible materials instead of plastics and other unsustainable materials. And so it wouldn't be, for me, this is not really an actual solution. It's more just a speculative concept in order to look into possible innovations and make people think. So some of my experiments, I wanted to do half of this installation, let's call it, with products that actually already exist. So, for example, pasta straws from a brand called Strudels, which I'll talk about in a bit. And they, Maxime, the founder of Strudels, is joining us on the talk on Thursday. So if you want to find out a bit more about what he does, you can join us then. I also, when I worked at Tour de Fork, they were making salt plates, and I thought that was really interesting. So my idea would have been to collaborate. So this whole tray design would have been for the physical exhibition for the Dutch Design Week, and obviously this has changed a little bit, so maybe you'll be able to work on this a bit later. But the idea was to sort of use some products that already exist, because there are designers and there are people, brands and companies who are already using these edible materials, and then to try and use other ones that I'm making myself. So, for example, I used agar to make some salt packets, which you can see in some pictures that I've shared recently. And it was just, again, to make people think, oh, wow, all of these things are either edible or they are made of edible materials, and they can actually be, they will biodegrade much quicker. And I think it would be really interesting to see, for example, if we have this whole tray with the cups and the plates and the cutlery and all the food there, and then wait until it actually disintegrates and sort of biodegrades. I think that would be really fascinating to watch and see how long it would take versus a normal set, let's say. And so for this workshop, I recently shared a picture of some edible cutlery that I made. And I think I got a lot of compliments about it, and I think people were quite curious. And so I thought about doing a workshop around this. And it sort of made me think as well about what is cutlery and why do we use cutlery? In most Western countries, we use a knife, a fork, and a spoon. But in many others, one pair of chopsticks does the trick, even when preparing food, for example. And in other cultures, just your hands are your cutlery. So what about disposable cutlery as well? Some materials that are said to be, as I said before, compostable are actually only compostable in high temperature industrial composting plants, so not in your garden compost bin. And so we're just still creating some waste of some sort. So what about making cutlery or the material used part of the dish or part of the experience? So I've seen a lot of brands and designers, as I've said before, starting to use edible materials such as strudels, the pasta straws. Notpla as well are another brand that are using seaweed to make small packages to drink water and to distribute at sporting events. They have also recently done a collaboration with Just Eat, putting ketchup in their seaweed packets, which I thought was really interesting because, again, sauce packets and salt and pepper packets are things that are used once and we don't really know where that goes after, and we don't really realise that it's actually still a bit more waste again. And it would be amazing if we can try and avoid that a bit more. There are other brands like Lollyware as well. They make straws out of a seaweed material, I believe. So I think there's been a big trend about about rethinking the plastic bottle and the plastic straws, which I think has been really good. And there are more and more regulations now. So I've seen a lot of restaurants and bars that are starting to swap these items into more sustainable options such as paper straws or pasta straws, as I've seen sometimes as well. So I think this is really good and the discussion is really happening, and things are starting to change. But I think it's not just a trend. I think it's here to stay, and this is really something we have to focus on, I think especially in the hospitality industry. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what is going to happen in the next few years. And for example, seaweed is a very up-and-coming material as well that many people are investigating as it biodegrades really rapidly after use. And as I've mentioned before, agar-agar as well is a type of seaweed that can be used as a gelatin substitute, and it can also be spread in a thin layer and then dried to make a dissolvable packaging. So, for example, for salt and spices, so any dried food, as I explained before. And so this is the what I used for the image with the French fries, if you've seen this on my design profile. And so there are many other edible materials to work with, and you can experiment with these at home. And so I'll guide you through a few recipes and ideas that I sort of came up with, I've seen around, and I just thought it'd be nice to share them here. They're not completely new. Obviously, I'm sure some of you have seen these before, but I think it's just fun, maybe if you're hosting a dinner or just want to try something a bit different and challenge your habits in using cutlery. So the first one, which I used in the photo for this workshop and the main picture for this project, is simply using flour and water. And so the texture is pretty solid in the end once you've baked your cutlery, and you can use them to eat soft foods, so like hummus and other dips as well. I think it's quite fun. You can use them to start to serve some dips like that as well. So I have a few here that I've baked this morning. So this is a spoon, for example, and then we've got a knife. This has got some paprika spice on it, and then some forks. So they're quite rustic shaped, but again, you can play around with this. I will explain how you can make these, but it's just basically flour and water. And you can really play around, I think, with the texture, if you want to make it. These ones I made this morning, I actually have a bit more water than I did before, so they're a bit softer. And I think you can really play around with the way that you make them. So for this recipe, I used about 3 cups of plain flour. You can also use bread flour. And then you can play around with the types of flour as well. So I've only done them with plain flour, but perhaps you can maybe try with buckwheat flour, or I've seen others with rice flour, and sort of creating different combination depending on what you want to use them for. You can probably make them, so these are more savoury at the moment, but you can make them sweet as well if you wanted to try. And so I use about 3 cups of flour for this one, and then 1 cup of water. So it's sort of 1/3 water for the proportion of flour, and then add a bit of salt as well, just for flavouring. And so at this stage, you can also add any colouring. So I would add that into the flour before you mix it with the water, just so it makes it easier to mix. So you can add beetroot powder or charcoal powder. There's a lot of different powders that you can find, edible powders, maybe spinach powder as well. Or you can I quite like using natural food colourings, but you can also use different kinds of colourings as well. And actually spices as well can work really nicely. So either you can really incorporate them into the dough, or you can also add the spices at the end. So like I did here with the paprika on this knife. I'd actually originally put za'atar on the back of these spoons here, but it has disappeared slightly while baking. But maybe at the end you could also, depending on how you're serving them, you could probably paint a little bit of olive oil and then sprinkle some spices on there. That might help the spices to stick a bit more. So once you've mixed everything together in a bowl, you can start kneading the dough onto a hard surface. And then, so you need to knead it about 5 minutes until the dough is sort of ready. You want it to be fairly smooth. And then you just need to spread a bit of flour on a hard surface and then roll it out with a rolling pin. And just try and roll it out as flat as you want the thickness of your cutlery to be. You can make them, I guess, pretty chunky or a bit thinner. Just be careful when it cooks. It will get slightly thicker than the dough itself during the baking. And what I've done to cut these out was I actually used some existing cutlery to shape it out. So I just put it onto the dough and then use a sharp knife and cut around them. And for the forks, the shapes that need a slight bend, so the forks, for example, like these ones, if you put them on the flat surface, obviously they'll be flat. So if you can put them on put the dough onto some stainless steel cutlery, and then to keep the shape on, and then you put them directly in the oven. So you need to be sure your cutlery can go in the oven. But generally most stainless steel cutlery I think can go in the oven. And then it might be slightly sticky to the cutlery at the end, but just use a knife and you can sort of cut along the dough to just release it from the stainless steel cutlery. And yeah, this is about how I made the bread cutlery. So again, you can play around with the flour, the texture, and the ingredients and the flavourings that you want to add to this. And so you just repeat this until you've used up all your dough. And once you've cut all the cutlery, you can put them all on a baking sheet and then into the oven. I think I put mine about 10 minutes, depending on how strong your oven is, and around 180 degrees. But again, this is sort of just an idea, and you can really try different things at home. And so you want them to be cooked just about enough so they don't start going brown if you want to keep the colour. And maybe a little bit more, for example, mine would have been a bit harder. It depends if you want them more soft or slightly harder. So if the stronger they are, obviously the more you can really use them. Obviously these can't really be used exactly as real cutlery, but they are quite similar, so you could still have the same actions. So the knives and the spoons could still be used to dip some sauces out, for example. So I think this is just a fun idea, very simple, but a fun idea to try at home. So the second recipe that I actually tried recently for another project was with meringue. So here are some spoons that I've made in meringue. So these are very simple again. I tried to make the shapes on top of cutlery, but it didn't really ended up sticking quite a lot to the cutlery in the oven. So maybe there are other techniques to keep meringue in shape a bit more. But I thought I really like working with meringue because you can really shape quite detailed textures and detailed a lot of details onto in the different shapes. And so these are just very simple spoons that I've made. I decided to slightly colour them with just a light yellow colour, and I put some orange blossom water in them, which you have to be slightly careful of adding too much liquid in your meringue as well, because it might make them a bit too soft. So you just want to use your favorite meringue recipe for this one. And then you can just add it to a piping bag, and then you can form some spoon shapes. Maybe you can try as well. I've only tried these spoons, but you could probably try some knives or some sort of other utensil or cutlery shapes. Again, you want to try and keep these not too big, because then they get really fragile, and just be sure to bake them completely through. And you can serve these are a bit more rustic. Than the breads you eat. So, and then the final recipe that I've got, and I think this is a really fun one as well. So these are spoons that I've made with chocolate. So again, spoons are something that are fairly fun to make because they're less intricate than forks, obviously, and then and as knives, and you can sort of use them for a lot of different dishes. So I've seen a lot of these spoons in different materials that have been made with sugar, and I've seen these with chocolate as well. So I thought I'd try these with white chocolate and pistachios. So I'll see if we can see a bit closer. But they're really nice, really tasty, and I think it's quite fun to have the different, to have a bit of pistachio in them. And so these which you can find on online very easily. I've tried to look for some knife or some fork molds, but I couldn't seem to find some. You might be able to find, I think I've seen actually a knife mold to make a knife out of sugar. So I think that'd be quite interesting to try. But yeah, spoons are really fun to use. Then you can sort of dip them into hot chocolate or into different sweet dishes. And all you need to do is just simply melt the chocolate and then pour it into your molds. I put the pistachio before, so you can put other spices, maybe even some salt, coloured salt, some edible flowers or anything else to decorate or to add flavour. You could probably temper the chocolate as well, which I didn't do for this one, just to make them so that they don't melt too quickly in your hands. But yeah, these I think were really fun to make. It keeps the shape really nicely. They really look like spoons and quite detailed. And you can play with the texture. So I think this is quite fun to have the pistachio, as it gives it a sort of bit of a nutty and and a little bit of a crunchy taste to when you bite into the spoon. So obviously with all these different cutlery recipes, the idea is to sort of integrate them really with the foods and the dishes that you are making. So you obviously want them to be to taste quite nice, and also to complement your dish in a really nice way. So you can really play with these. These are just really a few simple ideas. They're really simple recipes, and there are loads of other ways that you can play with this. So I really invite you to have a look around and to try some of this at home. And the idea is really to challenge what cutlery is and how you can include this in your dishes, and try and think about the waste that we create. So especially with disposable cutlery and sort of disposable packaging as well. So maybe you can think of during your day how much packaging you use and how much packaging you put in your bin. I think we really need to work a bit more on not even using just recyclable materials or things that can be composted, but actually trying to reduce the waste that we create. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this workshop, and I'm really excited to do this talk as well on Thursday this week, coming up, so find more information on the Isola website. But we will be doing a talk on the future of packaging and edible innovations. So again, I think this is I've only looked into the surface of edible materials, but there is a whole world up there, and a whole load of designers and people who are really experienced in this and who are really looking to create innovations for the future of our food and the future of our environment and our planet. And so we will be talking with a panel of really amazing and interesting people. So I really invite you to join us for this and to look at the different speakers that we'll have. And yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. It was really nice to have you all. I hope I will see some pictures of some edible cutlery that you will have made at home. It would be really nice to see what you've managed to try, the different textures and flavors that you have tried to explore and to innovate a bit more at home. So yeah, thank you very much for joining.